Just a few hours later, by 9 a.m., Eve had already contracted painters to repaint the stone walls and obliterate all evidence of the horrific events of the night before. Joe watched Eve the whole time, of course, through his trusty binoculars. Eve had decided to take the day off from work and handle the whole mess, even though she could ill afford another day away from her empire. But Simmy had her hands full with the twins, and Eve also had to deal with that nasty business of the traps. She hired some specialist to go over the entire grounds with a metal detector, and Joe watched, terrified that his encampment would be found. It wasn't, and Joe breathed a sigh of relief. But after watching the lovely, strong, paranoid, furious Eve, for the first time Joe's fascination over what Eve was up to was superseded by a storm of questions about exactly who it was he was watching. He realized he didn't know the answer to that. He didn't have the slightest idea. So then, as Eve was heading back in about sunset, "Oh, and what a stunning sunset it was," Joe observed. Joe gave up watching and decided to go visit Zach. A battered pickup drove by, and Joe hitched a ride to town and onto the information superhighway. His curiosity had finally gotten the best of him. An hour later, he was sitting in the thrift shop using the phone in Zach's office for a long-distance call. "Yeah, Stanley? Hi. You'll never guess who the—" "Well, I'll be dipped in chowder, you guessed." "What? Am I working? Well, no, not right now. Right now I'm bullshitting on the phone with you." "Oh, boss just walked in." Zach trudged in, smirking at Joe and lugging a big battered ship's figurehead, a woman with sea serpents licking at her bosoms. Joe leered at it as he talked. "Well, Stanley, I'm an antiques dealer. Can you believe it?" "Well, yeah, I know it's a weird profession for an ex-Navy SEAL, but what can I say? I'm trying to get in touch with my feminine side." Zach chuckled at this last comment as he propped up the figurehead and sauntered back out of his office. Then Joe's tone became very businesslike. "Anyway, Stanley, I need you to get me the dirt on someone, a background check." "Well, no, it's not a rush. Tonight, tomorrow, however long it takes. You can call me back at this number. I'll be here. But yeah, it's important." Back on the home front, Eve stopped by the 20th Century House to check in, slipping into her modernistic home to call the office and see what fires had erupted there. Eve was exhausted, trying to put the events of last night out of her mind. As Eve checked in her mailbox, she opened the newspaper and stared in horror at the headlines. "Airport to be built in Gaines Glen. Amish community next door in uproar. Rare protests." Eve slumped down and sobbed. Would this never end? Not even a quiet night with the twins and some of Simmy's homemade triple fudge pudding cake with fresh double-clotted cream improved Eve's mood. Back at the Salvation Army shop, Joe was now alone in the dark store, sleeping on a ratty old bed for sale in the furniture section. He dreamed that he was asleep dreaming, having more nightmares of Nam. Suddenly Joe sat up in bed, but this was not Joe of the present, it was Joe of the past. A woman was sleeping next to him. Joe's eyes darted around in the dark. He heard noises, pulled a gun from under his pillow, jumped out of bed, still more in a dream than awake. He saw someone lurking in the shadows and pulled the trigger. Shots rang out, then screams. His wife sat up. Joe's son had crumpled to the floor, bleeding and screaming. Ambulance, sirens, and a long, tortuous wait at the hospital waiting room, when finally the doctor emerged to talk to Joe and his hysterical wife. "Folks, Josh, he's going to be okay. Bullet just grazed him. It didn't penetrate." The next day, her wounded son by her side and the baby strapped into a child safety seat, Joe's wife packed up the car and the kids and drove out of his life. Joe stood on the front porch, the porch he'd built himself brick by brick when he got back from Nam. Just one more effort to regain his sanity, and he watched that car drive off. He collapsed and wept, and his life spiraled down from that moment deeper and deeper into hell. Joe sat up in a cold sweat again, hearing a noise and going for the gun under his pillow, but this time he remembered there was no gun. He was on a bed in the thrift shop. He saw what was making the noise. A big, ugly rat ran across the train of a used wedding dress on display in the window. Joe shook his head, orienting himself, and what he saw was creepy in the darkness. A macabre clown face, old framed photographs of families long forgotten and for sale, mannequins in outrageous 60s clothing, garish wigs, and their smiles frozen. Dawn, the eye of the storm. It was Saturday. Eve was home for the day, and she stepped out of the gates, yawned, picked up the paper. Oh, this time the headlines were about the shooting. She sighed. She just couldn't get a break. She ambled a little further, then stopped and stared in horror. The graffiti was back. It was even worse. Eve was barely keeping it together. Meanwhile, in town, back at the Salvation Army thrift shop, Zach turned on the neon open sign and gently tapped Joe to wake him. Joe was startled, but he calmed down when he saw it was just Zach. Zach smiled, his gold tooth catching the morning sun. Got a fresh pot of coffee brewing, and there's someone on the phone for you, Joe. I told him you was in a big sales meeting. Joe chuckled, then jumped out of bed to go get the call. Eve was pacing in her office in the 20th Century House. She had once again called the painters about the graffiti. Eve was in a foul mood. The events of the last few days had so obviously taken their toll. She diddled with her computer while she talked on the phone. Look, Joan, you tell that bastard that if he dares renege, if the thought of going back on his word so much as crosses his mind, I will know. I will know because of that extrasensory perception that is my gift, that mental telepathy for which I'm so famous. And if I see that he's going to crap out on this deal, I will use my extraordinary telekinetic powers to cause his steak knife to jump off the table, fly through the air, and plunge into his heart. There was a pause before Joan responded. So, you want me to tell Biggs you consider his word binding? Eve was yanking on her old comfortable boots. Joan, that's why I hired you. It's like you can read my mind. I'll talk to you in a few after you talk to him. Oh, no problem, Eve, and don't bother to apologize for ruining my weekend. Eve hung up on Joan, grabbed her old purse and cell phone, the only reminder of this life, and headed out the door. She jumped on her bike and pedaled down the path to the well-worn iron gates. Back at the thrift shop, Joe was on the phone long distance, listening fascinated. You're kidding. Well, no wonder she... Well, that's fascinating. I mean, it's fucking tragic, but it's also fucking fascinating. Zach trudged into the office and handed Joe a cup of coffee. Don't swear in the Lord's store, Joe. Joe looked embarrassed, taking the coffee. Sorry, Zach. And then Joe chuckled into the phone. No, I wasn't talking to you, Stanley. I was talking to my secretary. Zach shook his head and laughed. Eve was biking angrily down the path from the modern house to the A-frame when the cell phone jammed in her boot rang. Eve retrieved it, answered it, listened a moment, and then turned a shade of eggplant. No! Don't tell me that. I made it clear backing out was not an option. Well, I know he never gave me anything in writing, but, oh, damn it, you just see if I ever do business with him again. Look, Joan, I didn't mean to take this all out on you. It's just... God. In a rare moment of overwhelm, Eve finally crumbled. Joan, I'm not thinking clearly. I'll see you tomorrow. Eve hung up, and within 2 seconds the cell phone rang again. Eve answered it, listened, then gasped at the news. But I don't understand. You said the dog would be fine after the wound healed. You said you just needed to observe it. What do you mean he's dead? Eve hung up again. She jumped off the bike, collapsed at the base of a beautiful old oak tree, and burst into sobs. The grief and pain and rage that she'd struggled to hold in for months at a time finally came flowing out, and it was as though her pain touched the other creatures of the forest. A chipmunk came out of its hole to blink at her. A bird lit on a branch and cocked its head. A deer and its fawn froze and listened to the sound of her sobbing. And then, after a moment, Eve summoned her strength, dried her tears, and got back on her bike. She was forcing a smile by the time she hurried up the steps to greet the twins, and the greeting they gave her made it all worthwhile. A penniless, scruffy, bedraggled man wearing patched clothes with holes in his shoes, sitting in front of a state-of-the-art personal computer. What an oxymoron Joe was, almost as much as the image that Eve so often made when she was between her two worlds, walking on the edge of two lives. Joe was in the office at the Salvation Army, staring at Zach's Mac, doing a little online research. Zach strolled in. "Find what you were looking for?" "Yeah. Man, Zach, this World Wide Web is fucking amazing." "Oh, sorry. Sorry, Zach. It is truly amazing." Zach shook his head as he got the broom from the closet. "Joe, I don't understand. You're smart, you're well-trained, multi-talented. Why the heck do you live on the street, a homeless bum?" "I'm not a homeless bum. I'm the last of the outdoorsmen, a pioneer like Johnny Appleseed." Zach stopped sweeping and eyeballed Joe. "When did you ever plant an apple tree?" "Oh, Zach, with every favor I get a lecture. I'll stop coming around, Zach. I swear I will." "Oh, that's a big fat bluff. You'll keep coming around because you're just a lazy, desperate, homeless bum." Joe just laughed, but Zach looked upset and started to leave, then turned around. "And Joe, it's a big fat fucking tragedy, if you ask me." Joe looked at Zach, shocked at his language, but he could see that his old pal Zach really meant what he had just said. He really meant it. Meanwhile, out in the country, in the fortress, it was a perfect day, and if you hadn't known of the hell that had marred these walls and these lives just a couple of nights ago, well, you wouldn't even believe that anything could disturb the peace of these woods, of this house nestled so safely away from the real world. Simmy and Eve were cleaning up from lunch as the twins played jacks in the other room. Eve watched them for a moment, then went back to drying dishes. "Simmy, I was thinking, tonight we should have one of our old-fashioned campouts. You know the whole bit, campfire, toasted marshmallows, sleeping bags." Simmy turned to Eve, her face busting out in a big smile. "Why, Eve, it's like you've got mental telepathy. I was thinking the same thing all morning. That always puts you in a good mood. In fact, I think you enjoy it more than the twins." "Yes, I do like our little campouts. They bring me a lot of peace. I don't know why." "Oh, I know why you like them so much. It's 'cause that's the last memory you have of Noel and Christopher. You told me about—" And suddenly Simmy stopped herself, amazed at her own insensitivity. "Eve, I don't know what I was thinking bringing that up. Making you remember, especially after Halloween night." "Simmy, it's all right. I know you didn't mean any harm, and yes, lately I have been living that hell all over again. And the twins sense something's wrong. That's why I thought maybe a good old-fashioned camp-out might be just the ticket." "I couldn't agree more. I'll air out the sleeping bags and pack some campfire food. Eve, I think I'll bring my guitar." Suddenly, Eve looked uncomfortable. "Simmy, I was thinking I'd like to spend some time alone with the twins. Just the three of us this time. Just me and the twins." Oh, dear. Simmy was very bruised. "Oh, sure. Whatever you want. I'm just the hired hand." "Simmy, you know that's not true. It's just that you spend lots of time with them. I'm the one who's been remiss, being at work all day, and I owe the twins some quality time. Besides, you understand what it's like to want to spend time alone with your kids. You're a mother." Oh, this time it was Eve's turn to be mortified. "Oh, Simmy, I am so sorry. I wasn't thinking." "Eve, it's not your fault. Everything has been turned upside down lately. Spooked, if you know what I mean. Bad juju." "Then you understand, Simmy, about my wanting to have the camp-out be just a threesome?" "Not really. I thought I was part of this family." "Simmy, you are. And you're my only real friend and ally, and I live with enough guilt, for God's sake, so don't you go adding to it." It was a lovely night, The weather balmy and the camp out had gone splendidly. The twins had each eaten 3 hot dogs with the works. Well, soybean tofu dogs, to be specific, but the twins didn't know there was any other kind. But when they were done with the main course, they were still starving for dessert, that rare treat with all the happy memories stuck to its sticky essence, s'mores. Eve and the twins each had a stick with a marshmallow jabbed on the end, and they nursed them over the fire. Dirk and Mary squealed as Eve's dropped into the flames with a hiss and melted into the red embers. Dirk shook his head.
I warned you, Mom. You always hold it too close to the fire. The marshmallow gets all black that way instead of golden.
But I like them blackened on the outside. Mary, hand me another one. Now, who wants to sing a song? They started singing, and they sang and sang and sang. It was late now, way past the twins' bedtime, but the sugar and the brisk air were keeping them wide awake, not wanting the evening to end. Crickets chirped and owls hooted softly as mother and children sat quietly, peacefully staring at the dying fire. Dirk played with a stick in the dirt.
Mom, you know how every day when you come home from school you ask us what we learned and we tell you and we talk about it for a while?
Yes.
Well, we always tell you about these interesting places from our history books and geography and stuff, but how come we never go there?
Mary nodded in agreement.
Yeah, we never get to go anywhere. How come? Yeah, Mom. I mean, when do we get to have some adventures of our own? It gets really boring sometimes, and we never have any of our own.
Eve picked at a marshmallow nervously. But you have lots of fun. Don't you do fun things with Simmy?
Well, sort of, but it's all the same after a while, Mom. I mean, gee, what's the point of studying all this historical stuff and places and cultures if we never get to go there?
Eve sighed, realizing the subject was not going to go away. Come here, both of you. They moved in closer, and Eve nuzzled them. First of all, you are going to get to see all those things and go to all those places and have all sorts of adventures, just as many as you want.
But not yet. Not until we're much older,
the twins interrupted together. Yes, that's right. And yes, I know you've heard that a bunch of times before. Hey, you two didn't scooch in close enough. She hugged one under either arm. Okay, kids, now let me explain again. Each culture has a different way of celebrating when a child becomes an adult. Dirk sighed, bored.
I remember in Africa they gotta spend the night alone in the jungle and kill a wild beast and bring it to the tribe.
Well, at least you don't have to go through all that when the time comes, spending a scary night in the jungle and having to kill a tiger. Well, you wouldn't want to have to do that, would you? Mary shook her head no vigorously, but Eve could see Dirk was thinking about it. The point is, when you're older, and only when you're much older than you are now, we'll sit down and prepare you for it in our own special way. And that's a promise.
But, Mom, how come we have to wait so long? Yeah, we read lots of stories about kids who had fabulous adventures and they weren't any older than us.
Well, for one thing, a lot of those stories were made-up stories, Simmy's fairy tales. And it's very important, not to confuse what is real with what is a fairy tale. You know that, don't you? The twins nodded largely. And for another thing, the world has changed a lot. Well, hard as it may be to believe, the world has become an even more dangerous place than it was when those children went out into the world and had those adventures with dragons and pirates and so forth.
It has?
Eve nodded solemnly. It has. But Dirk threw down his stick, a pout on his face.
But, Mom, I'm getting pretty grown up. Every day more and more. I'm almost an adult. I could handle it.
Dirk, do you remember when you were climbing that tree and you fell out of it and broke your leg and your ankle both, and the doctor came to the house and set it, and you had to wear 2 casts for 2 months?
Oh, that was awful. I didn't know anything in the world could hurt as bad as my broken leg did, except my broken toes and my arm. That hurt even worse.
Yes, I remember how much it hurt you, too. You complained day and night. Mom, my leg hurts. Mom, my arm hurts. Mom, carry me. Then Eve turned to Mary. Mary, do you remember when you were picking berries for Simmy's pies and you walked into a wasp's nest?
Oh, Mom, don't make me think about that. I got 61 stings, remember? The doctor counted. And next day he sent me 61 chocolate bars with a note. But I remember you kept the chocolate bars and just gave me one each day.
I remember that too, Mary, but the point is, do you remember how badly those wasp stings hurt? How terrible the stinging was?
I sure do. Jiminy Cricket, I never want to go through that again.
Oh, and sweetheart, I pray you never do. Now, listen, both of you. Do you remember when your first dog died? He got so old the vet had to come and put him to sleep because Bingo was very sick with the cancer and in terrible pain. The twins both nodded, their eyes wide. Mary stuck out her lower lip.
Yeah, he wasn't even himself in the end. When he looked at you, it's like he wasn't looking at you at all. He didn't want to play anymore or anything. Just sleep. Yeah, and he had those big bumps all over him. That was pretty creepy. Still, I was sad when the doctor put him to sleep.
I remember that too. Both of you cried all night.
Gee, Mom, I don't like to think about all this stuff.
Well, you have to, just for a bit. Because we can't keep having the same discussion over and over again. Now, do you remember on Amish Day when Brother Daniel's horse tripped jumping a fence and it broke its leg and had to be shot, and we had to watch what... Dirk jumped up, snapping his stick and throwing it.
Mom, how come you're saying all this sad stuff? Yeah, Mom, we were having such a good time before.
Because, my dears, I am trying to make a point. I love you, and I want you to understand this because this is the most important thing I've ever said to you.
Really?
Really. Now, Dirk, stop jumping around. Now sit down and listen to me like a man, and then I'll know that you're turning into a grown-up. He obeyed. Eve looked at him, then at Mary, fire in her eyes. You know I love you both very much, and I very much would like you to be able to have grand adventures, but there are many dangers lurking just outside those stone walls. I am telling you the truth. Twins, they hurt worse, 100 times worse than broken arms or broken toes, and the dangers out there can sting you more than 10,000 wasps.
Really? Worse than 10,000?
Yes. And your heart will ache deeper than when your dog died, and you'll feel so much sadder than when you saw them shoot your favorite dapple horse.
But, Mom, how could anything out there be worse than all those things you said?
You'll understand when you're older.
But you always say that.
Dirk, I want you to try to understand this. Part of what is so wonderful about being a child is that you don't have to understand the sad things. You don't even need to think about them, not as long as we have this fortress and each other. The children thought about this a long time, and Eve was hoping, praying as she tucked them in for the night and watched them drift off to sleep that her words would not give them nightmares. But she had to say what she said, Eve told herself, because as far as she could see, the world was only getting worse, she thought, remembering the ghastly images someone had painted on her own precious walls just a couple of nights ago. The devil, the Hitler, the erect phallic symbols, the sadomasochisms, the blood, the skulls. Yes, the world was not getting any better, it was getting worse, and it would be many, many years before her angels stepped one foot in hell. But tonight, here and now, it was safe. They were safe here. Eve had fallen into a peaceful sleep. She was having sweet dreams, for once, when suddenly her eyes popped open. Dirk was jostling her.
Mom, wake up. Mary's gone.
Eve sat bolt upright immediately. Mary's sleeping bag was empty. Eve yanked on her shoes and darted from the tent. The troll was under the bridge. Joe was in his own little world. He'd watched the family, his family, if the truth of his fantasies be told, fall into a sweet sleep. And now he sat wakeful, headphones from his Walkman clamped over his ears, and for one brief moment we can see the world from his point of view, lush classical music filling his spirit and the forest as he read poetry by moonlight. But because of the headphones, he did not hear little Mary creep up behind him, watching him. She tapped him on the back, and he whirled around. And that is what Eve saw from a distance. She gasped in horror. A shaggy monster on her property, leaning over her daughter. The wretched man touched Mary. Eve grabbed a branch at her feet and brained the man before he had time to react. Joe dropped to the ground, unconscious, the headphones still clamped over his ears. Mary screamed something about Mommy killing the troll. Eve hugged her daughter, checking her to see if she was all right. The next hour was a blur and a nightmare for Eve. She frantically got Simmy to take care of the children while Eve called an ambulance, all the while making sure the twins couldn't see what was happening. The scary, loud, bright ambulance, or the strange men lurking, medics in white, that moved like specters through the dark trees to where Joe lay unconscious. But there was nothing Eve could do to keep the children from hearing the song of the sirens. And then, after begging Simmy to stay with the children, tell them some kind of story, Eve bolted to the hospital to find out about Joe, to find out whether or not her whole carefully constructed world was going to come crashing down around her. The hospital, 3 a.m. Eve jogged down the hall to the nursing station. A nurse, looking bored, looked up from her jumbles puzzle. The man that they brought in with the head injury. He'll live. You can visit, room 234. Eve ran down the hall and peeked in. Joe was channel surfing, staring at the TV and clutching the remote. Eve knocked. May I come in? Are you armed? Eve laughed nervously and sat down in an uncomfortable institutional chair. Mr. Joe. Call me Joe. No one calls me by my last name. Fine, okay, Joe. I like that. It's friendlier. Friendlier? Coming from you? That's an odd comment. Look, Mr. Joe, I am truly sorry, more than you know. I am not a violent person. More than you can possibly imagine. I believe in nonviolence. Oh, right. Lady, you could have killed me. Doctor said you nearly did. Listen, I said I was sorry, but see it from my point of view. There I am on my own property having a peaceful camp out with my kids when I wake up in the middle of the night to find a shaggy, hulking creep. No offense. None taken. Well, so anyway, give me a break. You could have been anyone, a pedophile, a murderer. Couldn't you have asked first? Come on, get real. Look, I came here to apologize and tell you you have nothing to worry about. The doctor says you're going to be fine, and although I understand you have no insurance, surprise, surprise, this is your lucky day because I'm going to pay all your medical bills, Joe. That's how bad I feel about braining you with the branch. I guess I should be happy you weren't packing a pistol. Well, I told you I'm completely non-violent. And then, with great panache, Joe rubbed the bandage wrapped around his head. Okay, you've made your point. But you should be grateful you didn't get worse lurking around like that. And by the way, how the hell did you get over 14-foot-high stone walls anyway? And where did you get off acting the martyr, the victim? You should thank me for not having you arrested for being on my property. Oh, lady, this is your idea of an apology? Okay, look. Let's just do what we have to do to wrap this up so we can both go on with our lives. Hey, it's not like I got a full agenda, lady. My daytimer is blank. Look, in spite of the fact that you were on my property talking to my little girl in the middle of the night, I'm keeping my temper and being extraordinarily nice about this. Now, would an extra $5,000 on top of medical expenses make you recover any faster? Ha! Figures. Any damage you do, you figure you can buy your way out of, and with pretty small potatoes at that. Think you can buy me off for $5,000, lady? What? Look, you were on my property. I was just defending my little girl. No, I don't think that's the way she would tell it. She and I were just talking. In fact, Mary and I are good friends. What? Don't get your knickers in a twist. It's all been perfectly innocent. I had a little girl myself, and, lady, I could never do anything. Then he stopped, a nightmare from Nam, an accidental atrocity running across his brain. That is, I could never intentionally do anything to harm a child, especially not that little Mary. She is a doll. And at these words, Eve lunged at Joe, and he pressed the nurse's button as she strangled him. Eve had her hands around Joe's neck, and it looked like she really would strangle him. He still had his finger on the call button. Nurses, doctors, and orderlies came running, but by then Eve had backed off. And it was a face-off between Joe and Eve as staff ran in. Joe looked at Eve as he spoke. "Nothing, folks. Lady woke me from a terrible nightmare. Scared the hell out of me. Must have been that damn Oliver Stone movie I fell asleep watching." Everyone calmed down and ambled out. Eve eyed Joe. "Thanks. You could have really made that rough for me." "Oh, I'm far from done with you, lady." "Just what the hell is that supposed to mean?" "You'll be hearing from my attorney." "You bastard, I should have known." Eve, anyone ever tell you your people skills could use some sharpening?" "Oh, God damn you. I should have called the cops instead of an ambulance. I wish I had been carrying a gun." And then Eve tried to calm down. "Look, Joe, you stand as much chance to lose a lawsuit as win one, and I don't have time to sit in court. Just, tell me, how much will it take to get you to crawl back under the rock you crawled out of?" "Ooh, blank check. Now you're starting to talk my language." "Well, good. Then just name your price. I want you to sign something, of course." "Nope. No way. You wouldn't buckle so easily unless you had a hell of a lot to lose. And I thought you were supposed to be such a great negotiator, Eve. Such a mover and shaker sitting up there in the clouds like Zeus's wife in that office on the 40th floor." Joe had managed to yank Eve's chain again. Her eyes were blazing, and she approached him slowly, her face a blend of rage and disbelief. She leaned over him just as the doctor walked in. Eve whirled around. The doctor was looking at them oddly, trying to puzzle out what had just happened. Joe smiled blankly. "She was just fluffing my pillow, Doc. A very apologetic lady, and such maternal instincts." The doctor looked at Joe, then at Eve, then Joe. "Okay, whatever, but you're going to have to leave, ma'am. I've got to run some tests." Eve went to the door, giving Joe a last look, furious but searching. Savvy, sharp Eve did not know what the hell to make of him. Eve, still in her 20th century clothes, tornadoed into her modern house and was in her office pacing the floor, talking on the phone. Her digital clock said 3:45 a.m. Yes. Hello. Yes, I realize the time difference. I know what time it is there, but I must speak to him. This is an emergency. What? Okay, I understand, but please, just have him call me when he gets it, no matter what time it is. He already has the number. Okay, yeah, thank you. She hung up the phone and paced some more. At 4:30 a.m., Eve was still pacing. She'd raided her own mini-fridge. She'd gone through 2 airline-sized bottles of vodka, a bottle of Yoo-Hoo, a peanut log, and some Cheetos. She was going insane. She was going nuts. She just had to get this call, but she had to see the twins to check on them and ask Simmy what she... Oh! Suddenly, Eve yanked off her 20th century garb and threw on her Little House on the Prairie clothes. She grabbed her coat and was out the door. Then, on second thought, she hurried back in and grabbed her cell phone. She hurried down the path quickly, quietly, like a person trespassing. Eve flurried into the house, immediately shushed by Simmy, who had lulled the twins to sleep, not on their beds, but on the sofa. They stepped out onto the porch, Eve whispering frantically, "Simmy, I'm so sorry I was gone so long. I'm sorry to lay all this on you. I know tomorrow was supposed to be your day off." "Today." "What?" It's 5 a.m. on Sunday. Today is my day off. Eve tried to control her temper. Simmy, please now, don't start with me. The kids are fine. I made up some story, some fairy tale like you asked, but Eve, this just can't. Simmy, I wouldn't have been gone so long, but I was at the hospital and... Simmy, you won't believe it. What an evil man. And then... Eve, am I going to be able to make it to church in a couple of hours and my meeting? I mean, you know, I have not missed church or my Sunday meeting in 7 years. Simmy, don't you understand? This is an emergency. This is a crisis. This man intends to... Eve, do you mind if I excuse myself before I lose my temper and say something I might regret? And with that, Simmy huffed into her room. The sun was coming up. Eve was pacing on the back porch, wringing her hands, her thoughts racing. She nearly jumped out of her skin when the twins toddled out. They do everything together, she thought, waking, yawning, laughing, finishing each other's sentences, as though the bond was a part of their twinness. Eve reached her arms out and hugged them close. Oh, babies, I missed you so much, but what are you doing up so early? You should be asleep.
It's okay, Mommy. Simmy explained everything.
Oh, and exactly what did Simmy tell you? And at that moment, Eve's cell phone, tucked away in her boot, rang. She jumped up and stared at the twins, terrified, when magically Simmy saved the hour. She appeared, rolled her eyes, and took the kids' hands. The cell phone in Eve's boot rang again. Simmy talked over it. Oh, twins, that's just a special kind of cricket. Cricket only comes just before the snow falls. Simmy glared at Eve as the children followed her inside. Once the door was shut, Eve grabbed the cell phone and listened, praying. Hello? Oh, Larry, thank God it's you. Listen, I need to talk to you. Well, no, what I really need is to talk to you in person. Larry, I need you to fly down because... Eve stopped, then started again. Oh, Larry, God help me. What I need is for you to represent me. I'm in trouble. I'm in big trouble. Come save us, Larry. Eve scanned the incoming planes, beaming in relief when the one she was waiting for finally touched down. Her eyes lit up when she saw Larry. Eve ran to him and hugged him. He was her oldest friend. Sometimes, except for Simmy, it seemed he was her only true friend. He had thought enough to meet her at her children's graves that day so that she would not have to be alone on the anniversary of their death. And now he had dropped everything and left his family in the lurch to come rescue her again. She smiled up at him. Oh, Larry, thank God you're here. Eve and Larry left his hotel after checking in and headed for a nearby bar. Eve was nervous in the city, flinching and wincing at every loud sound. Drivers yelling at each other, the rat-a-tat-tat of workmen drilling in the street, the blabbering of the crazies that brushed by them. Larry was studying Eve the whole time. They eased into a booth at the pub near the hotel. The waitress brought them 2 strong drinks. Larry was calm, but on the defensive. Eve did that to people. Eve, I'll tell you why I didn't want to stay at your house and why I wanted you to come with me to the hotel and out into the world. Because with what you are about to go through, I wanted to see how you were handling the outside world. Damn it, Larry, that's not fair. What is this, giving me little tests with everything I'm already going through? Don't you see, Eve, that's my point exactly. Hey, Larry, don't play mind games with me. I deal with the real world, in the real world, every single day. Well, 5 days a week, excuse me, and I do a damn good job of it, thank you. Slow down, Eve. I know what you do, and I know how well you do it. And for what it's worth, I admire you for it. I admire you a lot, Eve. I mean, hell, if I were you, I probably would have gone crazy and blown my brains out a long time ago. Larry stopped mid-sentence, realizing what he had said. Oh, God, Eve, I'm so sorry I wasn't thinking. But still, no matter what you've been through, I can't be too easy on you, because they won't. Yes, I know you function in the real world, I mean, sort of, but in a way, it's as restricted and tightly controlled and fantastic even as that world you've made for them behind those stone walls, because you've got that kind of power and yes, that kind of money. Eve had had just about enough, but she knew this was not the time to shut him up. She gestured for the waitress. 2 more, please." Larry pressed on. "Eve, the fact is that this bastard can sue. And you just know there's some prick lawyer out there who will take it. And you know that, Eve. And the worst news is there's a good chance he'll win. Happens all the time. Some punk breaks in, gets hurt, sues the poor Patsy who was just trying to protect himself and his family." Eve took a stiff bolt of her drink. "Larry, I'm afraid it's worse than that." "Eve, is there something you haven't told me?" "Larry, I went to him as soon as he regained consciousness, and I spoke to him. I wanted to resolve this right away." "Oh, no, Eve, you know you broke the first rule of—" "Larry, let me finish. I panicked. I offered him money. He said no. Then I offered him more money and more money, and he kept saying no. And so finally I said, 'Name your price,' and still he wouldn't." Larry rolled his eyes, slumped back in his chair, and kicked back his second martini in one quick shot. "Jesus, Eve, this guy is going to bleed you dry." Oh, Beth, you're too funny to be just a news anchor. You should be doing stand-up. In another part of town, at a television studio, a pair of news anchors chuckled at footage of a new baby creature born just hours earlier at the local zoo. "Isn't that the cutest little thing?" said the anchorette, dressed in a peach suit with makeup that oh so subtly matched. "It sure is, Lila. I think I'd like to get one for a pet." Lila forced a titter at this last remark. "Well, you'd better check with your wife first, Tom. I don't think she's recovered from the ferret yet." Artificial chuckles, and then sterner expressions as they moved on to the next story. The male anchor looked solemnly into the camera. "Is it child abuse to never let your children leave the house? That's the question being asked today as the district attorney files charges against Eve Hartswick, owner of Hartswick Investments and one of the richest women in the state." Lila ran with the ball from here. "Our cameras caught up with the reclusive Ms. Hartswick's attorney, Lawrence Dolmar, leaving the courthouse earlier today." And on the television screen above the anchors, a barrage of reporters besieged Larry as he was getting in his car. He waved the cameras away. This charge is completely bogus. Ms. Hartswick has never abused those children, and nobody has accused her of that. There have been no witnesses whatsoever to any kind of abuse. The state is harassing Ms. Hartswick for raising her children as she sees fit." Back at her office, Eve slumped into her chair in horror as she watched the story unfold on TV. "Oh, my God." The phone rang. Eve pounced on it. "Jesus, Larry, what the hell is going on? I thought the bastard was out for money. How did the district attorney get in on this?" "Well, I know. Larry, I realize it's not your fault. Oh, God, why is this man doing this to me?" Eve listened a moment, then calmed down ever so slightly. You're right, Larry. You're right. I've got to stay calm and think how to handle this. I've got to think of the twins." And as soon as Eve hung up from Larry, she beeped Simmy, leaving a message, then hung up and paced the floor. The phone rang. Eve pounced on it and barked into it. Joan, no calls whatsoever unless it's Larry or Simmy." Eve heard a knocking. She whirled around and saw a reporter just outside the high-rise window, standing next to a window washer, shouting questions to her through the gates. Eve emitted a banshee scream and drew the blinds. Her mind was racing. The twins. Oh, my God, the twins. Eve grabbed her yellow pages and searched for a number. She dialed. Yes, hello? Yes, I have a problem with termites. In fact, you might say it's a termite emergency." Eve hurried through that bit of business and hung up, biting her knuckle almost until it bled, trying to think straight. The phone rang. Eve grabbed it and snapped into it. "Damn it, Joan, I told you—" "Oh, well, then put her through." Back at the house, Simmy, secreted away in her room on her cell phone, listened a moment. He what? You're serious? Well, that explains the helicopters that have been flying overhead all day. I've had to do some fancy talking to the twins." Eve was fuming and swearing as she drove down the country road and saw a swarm of reporters waiting at the gates. But she fooled them. She ducked down a dirt road to a camouflaged rear entrance nobody knew about but her. Once back at the house, Eve ran to her kids and hugged them. Simmy and Eve looked at each other. Eve distracted the twins with a bag of candy she'd bought especially for that purpose and whispered to Simmy, "Simmy, I've got a plan. It's just a stopgap, but it will keep away the prying eyes." The next morning, bright and early, Eve stood outside overseeing as a termite company inflated a huge plastic balloon over her entire house. The foreman was mystified. "But, lady, what's the point of us ballooning the house if we don't start spraying right away? I thought you wanted to get rid of those nasty little flying bugs you was so worried about." The whir of helicopter blades over their heads drowned out conversation. Eve shaded her eyes and stared up at it. "Oh, I don't think you've got enough poison in that whole tanker truck of yours to kill the flying bugs I'm worried about, but this will help." Eve turned to find Simmy standing there. "Simmy, the twins—" "Eve, don't even get me started on the story I told them. I came to see what's what." Simmy, will you be okay if I leave for a while?" "Oh, of course." "Oh, Eve, I know this is hell on you, but what are we going to do?" The foreman scratched his crotch thoroughly and looked befuddled. "Yeah, and what are we going to do, lady?" Eve glared at the helicopters. "Nothing for now. Just you leave that balloon in place, and as for me, I'm going to go take care of some rats." The district attorney's office. Eve stormed in, ignoring the receptionist's protests. The startled DA hung up the phone when he saw who it was. Eve started in on him, afraid of nothing. "Look, I don't know why you're doing this to me, why you've chosen to harass me and my family after—" "Hey, you can't just barge in here." "Shut up, Mr. District Attorney, who incidentally happens to be running for re-election. Look, I realize I can't stop you from going forward with this now. I know your political agenda all too well. But you better damn well take care of those choppers flying so low right over my house. We both know it's illegal and a violation of their zoning code, and I won't stand for you harassing me and letting the press run wild." The DA got up and walked around his desk. "Look, I have had just about enough of you." "Hey! I never met anyone who didn't have a few skeletons in their closet. You opened Pandora's box, damn you. Even if you backed off on this, which I know you won't, I can't get my old life back. Not right here, not right now. But so help me, you get those choppers down permanently." And then Eve stormed out without awaiting his reply. Next stop, the hospital. Eve tornadoed in, a woman on a mission. She stopped at the nurse's desk. "Hi, I'm here to see Joseph Rondell." The nurse looked up and studied Eve. "He's been released." "Been released where? Do you have an address?" "No, and I wouldn't give it to you if I did." "Well, look, surely there's some way that I can—" "Hey, look, I know who you are, lady, and I know what you did to your kids, and I think you are sick. Well, you're the one who should be getting some professional medical help. Now, get out of here before I call security." Eve backed off, not expecting this. It was to be the first of many attacks. Eve was sitting in the fetal position in the corner of a stark room in her 20th century house, near a total breakdown but somehow still managing to work. Her laptop was in front of her, and she cradled a cell phone as she tapped away at the keys. The phone rang, and she grabbed it. Larry, what happened at the meeting?" Eve listened a moment, then sighed, not sure whether she should be relieved or more frightened than ever for her crumbling little world. She nodded quickly, mechanically. Okay, Larry, yes, I understand. Oh, well, at least they agreed to do the interview with the kids at the house. Yeah, I guess that's something. Eve paced nervously as she waited for the counselors who had come to interview her children. The dark car pulled up to the gates. Eve leaned through the bars. If you could just park outside the gates, I'll show you in. Eve winced at the female counselor's outfit, a business suit but with a short skirt and high heels. Not too risque, but very 90s. Eve's children had never seen anything like this. Nothing Eve could do about it, though. She followed the counselors anxiously towards the house. They turned to her curtly. Miss Hartswick, we ask that you stay out here. We have to be alone with the children when we interview them. Eve tried to maintain control. But surely, isn't there some way? I won't say anything. I'll just stay in the background. Please, Mrs. Hartswick. It's very important that we follow procedure. Oh, by the way, where is their tutor? Oh, Simmy had to go to a very important meeting. She'll be back later. All right, if you'll excuse us, Mrs. Hartwick. They bypassed her and walked into the house. Eve heard them introducing themselves to the twins. Eve was shaking, near a breakdown. She paced and talked to herself, and then her eyes fell on the twins' treehouse. She walked over to it, climbed the steps, and retreated into their world. She clung to their little clothes, their toys that they had stashed up there. Eve cried quietly. But on the second floor of the elaborate treehouse, Joe, who had started this whole mess, sat just a few feet above Eve. He remained motionless, hoping she would not decide to poke her head through the opening to the second floor. Eve stared out the window, trying to see in the windows of her home to find out what was going on. One of the counselors was clutching a machine, a handheld tape recorder. Damn it. Oh, that would mean some fancy footwork, some fancy explaining. Eve was going crazy, wondering what four of them were talking about. Then she saw the twins taking the counselors upstairs out of Eve's line of sight. So Eve decided to go to the second floor of the treehouse. She popped her head up and blanched when she saw Joe. What the hell? Stay calm. Don't scream. Why shouldn't I? Because in this twosome, we both know who can make trouble for who. This is sick. You are twisted. Why are you stalking us? Why are you keeping your children prisoner? Well, why is it your business? And wait, why am I even defending myself to you? And my children are not prisoners. Their life is positively idyllic. Yeah, well, so was mine. And look how I turned out, man. Well, that is hardly my fault. It's not my fault, and it's probably not your parents' fault. It seems to me like you're just determined not to get along with the world. The world started it, honey. It takes two to tango. What do you mean, anyway? You had an idyllic childhood, and that's why you turned out like this? Well, I just meant, I grew up in West Virginia. Oh, God's country. Most beautiful countryside you ever saw. And my mom, she lived in this fantasy world. You see, my dad died in WW2, and he left her some money, so I was raised hearing how war was glorious, and he was a big hero, and that the world was a beautiful place. So after a childhood full of watching Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney singing patriotic war songs, marching in front of the American flag, well, then Vietnam comes along, and hell, I signed right up. I thought I was magic, because I survived like I was blessed. Man, I came out of Vietnam a big hero, so like the stupid, naive fuck that I am, I signed up for a second tour. Eve snorted cynically. So what happened? Did they shoot something important off, and now you're just too bitter to function? Isn't that the way the story usually goes? I mean, so what did they shoot off? Lady. It's not always about what they shoot off. In fact, I wish they'd shot my eyes out so I wouldn't have had to see what I saw." "Well, Joe, that's just too damn bad, but it doesn't have anything to do with how I am trying to raise my children." And with that, Eve got up stiffly, bumping her head on the low ceiling. She tried to maintain her dignity. "Now, if you will excuse me, I am getting the hell out of this treehouse, and you are getting the hell off of my property." "Nope." "Just what do you mean, nope?" Joe pointed out the window through some trees. "The press is watching, Eve." Eve looked to where he was pointing and did a double take. "Well, that son of a... How the hell did he get onto my property?" "Lady, how did I get onto your property? Man, for a brilliant woman, you're pretty slow. And that's another objection I have to this little Walton's Mountain approach to child-rearing of yours. What makes you so sure you're really protecting them from anything, Eve? All you're protecting them from is life experience, which is exactly what every human being needs to survive. If you're not careful, Eve, they will grow up as naive as you." "You don't know anything about me. Get the hell out of my treehouse." Joe got up, smiling affably. "If you insist." Eve looked out the window and saw the reporter with the camera looking around. All right, sit down, Joe, but just shut up. Just shut up." Joe did as he was told, but he stared at her. It was a searing stare, like he was trying to laser burn the fear and the stubbornness right out of her. Eve tried desperately to maintain her composure. They sat in the exact same pose in the courtroom, Joe staring at Eve, Eve trying to maintain her composure, as she now found herself having to testify in defense of how she had decided to raise her children. What children she had left, that is. It was a miracle she'd held her world together for this long. She still did not quite understand how Simmy had smoothed over the intrusion of the child welfare investigators, but what was worse, Eve had not been able to get a glimmer of what their evaluation had been like. And now this. The prosecution was relentless, hammering away at Eve. "Mrs. Hartswick, did you know that here in Chamois County more people die each year in their houses, right in their own homes, than die out there in the real world?" "Excuse me," Eve cut in, "but are you implying that people's homes are not the real world?" Giggles from the courtroom. The prosecutor bristled. "Let me rephrase that. My point, Mrs. Hartswick, is that there are more deaths in the home than outside of the home. You do believe those statistics, don't you?" Eve stared him down. "Sure, I believe that. Because what the statistics say is that most people die of heart attacks or strokes or cancer, or if they're lucky, peacefully in their beds of old age. And so sure, a lot of them die at home. Sure, I believe it." The prosecutor started to interrupt, but Eve pressed on. "But if you are asking me, do I think my kids are safer in my home, protected, with a state-of-the-art security system and a caregiver who's known them since they were born, and a mother who is there for them every day, do I think they're safer in that home I've created for them than they would be in a mall or a school parking lot or walking home from school? Yes, I think I keep them much safer than they would be in a place where any nut with a gun and an attitude can just drive by and—" Eve started to lose it. The prosecutor interrupted just in time. "All right, Mrs. Hartswick, you've made your point." Eve glowered at him. "I'm not sure I have." And, of course, there was the matter of the folks at work to deal with. Eve had decided to take the coward's way out, though. She rationalized that since she was being so strong in all other matters in this journey through hell she'd been forced into, well, she had the right to kind of weasel out of this one. She'd called a staff meeting and announced that things would be business as usual, but that she, Eve, would probably be able to get a lot more done from her home front, given the harassment from the press and others that she received every time she left her home. She added at the brief's meeting end that in regard to anyone's curiosities about her private life, well, it was none of their fucking business and heads would roll if gossip flew. And then she added another addendum, increasing everyone's share of stocks. Oh, and when Joan got back to her office, she found a sweet card about the baby, along with a gift of 5,000 shares of stock in the baby's name. Such were the strange ways of Eve, trapped in a corner. And when Eve left early in the afternoon to meet with Larry to hurry home to fight wars on other fronts, she found a brown paper bag on top of her car. Eve approached it gingerly, handling it like it was a bomb, and she peered inside. A large, ornate candle smelling of roses with angels and cherubs all around the base, and also a pair of Twinkies with a note from Reedy Johnson. "Miss Eve, still wishin' on that star for you." It was the first time that Eve had smiled, and she did not know how long.